Negative, Kane. That's further. Just kitty cammy in the corner.
I'm running over here now.
Sometimes putting on the uniform makes you a target.
In pursuit of suspect. West on Hall Road.
This is The War on Police, a national nightmare. Presented by Prepare to Act.
Backup is en route.
And here's your host, Chris Marciano.
It took me a little bit longer to get this out, but I wanted to make sure that I had the information that I wanted to present clearly and that it's accurate. And what I found is something very simple, that this one episode will have to spill into probably 2 or 3 episodes in regard to how our law enforcement officers across the country are being treated by a select handful of people that are making the rules for us, or spitting the narrative that they find to be most important. For those of you that don't know, my name is Chris Marciano. I just wrapped up a 25-year career in law enforcement in Watertown, Connecticut. I own a small business called Prepare to Act, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We are here to talk about our law enforcement officers fighting a battle with not much support from the people they need support from. The face of law enforcement has changed. The rules of the game have changed. To be 100% honest, the stakes couldn't be higher. I grew up with law enforcement running through my family, at my kitchen table for dinner, family functions and events. I grew up my entire life wanting to be a police officer. It's all I knew. It's all I wanted to know. And it's the only thing I could ever feel accomplished at. I believe we have upwards of 650,000 police officers sworn across the country. The vast majority of those are effective, reasonable, and real police officers. And if you took the time to ask any one of those real police officers what law enforcement is all about, the real cops would never say it's a job or I did it for career advancement. The real police officers are going to say that law enforcement is a passion. For most of those police officers that were meant to be cops, that's how it starts out. Passionate, empathetic, you're bright-eyed, and you're ready to save the world. And that's how it started for me. But go back further, I was 6 years old and riding my blue BMX bike, my father's old police hat, cap gun, had a siren on my bike, and I was running radar for cars that simply did not exist. As I patrolled my neighborhood, I would watch my father take time and pride in hand washing his police car before every shift. That's what law enforcement is supposed to be. Prideful, confident, people that are passionate to help others and want to put their life on the line, protect others' lives. My father would gear up in his press uniform, his polished leather belt, handcuff holsters, 6-shooter holster, his ammunition pouches. There's something about a police uniform when a kid sees it. It's exciting, and there's a clear symbol of authority and respect to it. I'd watch my father load up his 6-shot revolver. He'd grab his state trooper style hat, kiss me on the forehead, and step out the door. At that time, when he stepped out the door, he stepped into a world that was full of respect by those that abided the law and full of fear for those that decided to break it. It's amazing how the world can change. I graduated from the Connecticut Police Academy in 1997, class 264, with 32 other brand new police officers. I and my classmates and every new officer before us and every new officer after us swore to an oath. It's a law enforcement code of ethics. I attended my graduation December 1997. During commencement ceremonies, I remember many things, but one thing I specifically remember is one of our lead instructors saying to us that once you become a law enforcement officer, you are in a fishbowl and you are constantly watched. Put that into perspective, it was 1997. There were no cameras, no flip phones, but there was respect for law enforcement, a sentiment that traveled the country. And that night I was lucky enough to have my father pin my badge on my chest as I saluted him and later walked off stage to start my career in law enforcement as my father was ending his. We'll cover certain aspects of that code of ethics and try to tie it into why it's so difficult for law enforcement to do their jobs and why, for that reason, you and your family are less safe. You have to be a certain type of police officer to be an effective police officer. If you don't have any law enforcement officers in your family, or if you've never been a law enforcement officer, you can't completely understand that. You think you do, but you probably don't. So across our country, we have some politicians that think it's important to defund the police departments. They think it's important to push through police accountability bills that are not thought through fully. They put restrictions on our law enforcement officers that handcuff them from being able to do their job. It makes it unsafe for them and their communities that they're serving. And these laws and these acts that the politicians are pushing through, they lack common sense, but they do not lack an agenda. It's their agenda. It's what they think to be important. To be fully honest with you, I think that politicians are mostly just completely full of shit, self-indulged, self-motivated, except for one. I had one politician in my life and he deserves credit. He's a family friend forever. And I believe that he has the best intentions when he goes to work. And for that reason, I'm going to say there's probably a handful of others that deserve my same amount of respect. See, politicians have a certain amount of power, and I've seen it on a very small, local, politic, nonsense agenda. And I see how decisions are made. And it's not even the back room to the bar that these decisions are being made. It's the back room to the back room of that bar. Then phone calls and vying for position. It's sickening, is what it is to me. But I never played that game. When you give somebody some power that doesn't know how to process it or handle it, they take it too far. And yes, as I've mentioned, there are police officers across the country that take advantage of their power. I've always compared those police officers to the ones that were picked on in high school, and now they have something to prove. There was one trooper when I was growing up that was a total prick to me, even though I supported him and his career. And it was cops like that growing up that I always said to myself, I will never act like that. I wish I could figure out where he is now. I had a long career, 25 years. I was fortunate enough to be part of our patrol division, our detective bureau. I worked undercover narcotics for the entire state of Connecticut for several years. And I finished my career as a sergeant in our patrol division. And I'm here to tell you that the amount of bad police officers across this country is less than 1%. I'm confident in saying that. I understand what some of you are going to say. 1% is still a high number of 660,000. Sure. The one thing I can tell you for sure is that nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. That 1% acts up. There will be a police officer to step up and take control of the situation. But here's a question for you. What is more dangerous than a handful of bad police officers across this country? And as I say bad police officers, don't always think the worst. Yes, they commit crimes. Yes, they use too much force on occasion. But there's also bad police officers out there that just shouldn't be cops. They shouldn't be cops for a lot of reasons, not just the stupid shit that they do, but maybe the lack of confidence or courage, pride in the job. Maybe for them it was a career, something to do. What is more dangerous than that 1% of bad police officers are the politicians that are making the laws of the land, handcuffing these men and women from doing their jobs correctly. They cannot make the streets safe. They cannot make your neighborhood safe. They cannot do their jobs because of laws that people are passing that have no idea what it's like to be a police officer. Part of that oath that I mentioned earlier reads like this. I recognize the badge of my office to be a symbol of public faith. Faith, it says. You tell me how these officers across this country can feel that the public has faith in them to do their job. Don't get me wrong. The majority of people in this country support the police department. The majority want more police officers. The majority understands the importance of law. However, it's the small minority that have some powerful voices and agendas that set that tone. The news media, everything that we have heard for the last 3 or 4 years. You have to understand the criminal mind. The majority of criminals across the country are lazy, unmotivated, weak-minded. They lack confidence. They lack ethics and morals. They take and they steal and they hurt because that's what they know. What else they know is they know that they need weak targets. People that walk down Main Street with their heads down, That was our biggest problem up until these laws started changing. And now they understand that everybody's a weak target because what's happening across this country is that the criminal is getting more respect and more power than the law enforcement officers trying to stop them. Criminal element is opportunistic. They seek out easy targets. And when they confront you, they speak louder. They puff their chests. And when they find the right target, they point their cameras and their fingers. They clench their fists and they talk with confidence, aggression, and ill will. Here's another question. Do you see any comparison between the description of a street level criminal and the way those in office that support things like the zero bail law, the police accountability bill, or supporting the defund the police movement? Not calling these people criminals, but look how they act. To a section of the law enforcement code of ethics. I will maintain courageous calm in the face of danger, scorn, or ridicule. I will develop self-restraint and be constantly mindful of the welfare of others. When I read this, I think back to that video of the two officers in New York City when they got buckets of water poured over their heads and they had to walk away from it. Imagine if they didn't. Imagine if they just turned around and stood up for themselves the way any human being would walking down the street. They didn't. Our police officers across the country are being continually harassed by faceless TikTokers, YouTubers, social media influencers screaming for their badge numbers and their names, while the officers are simply trying to do their job. You see, in this police accountability bill, it was made very clear that an officer, when asked, would supply his name and badge number. Our names and badge numbers had to be clearly stitched on every piece of clothing we owned because of the police accountability bill. You get the idea of this. And okay, cool. To its point, there's no reason an officer shouldn't be willing to give their name's identification. However, you have people out there, criminally minded people, that have a bias and a hate toward law enforcement. Another name for them are just total assholes. They need to take everything a step further, threatening to sue officers that while attempting to control a scene or handle a motor vehicle accident, maybe even detaining a threat to our society, their cameras are in their faces stating it's the law and they must provide that information. Law enforcement is successful when they make split-second decisions that are best for society. These people are distracting to these officers, and they are hoping a mistake is made. This is meant to be a slow introduction to you about the idea of just how dangerous the environment is across our country. And I'm not talking about how dangerous it is for police. I'm talking about how dangerous it is for you and your family, how dangerous it is for the law-abiding citizen that's just working hard to give a good life to their family, that is full of love and comfort and safety. The law-abiding citizen that wants to feel safe in their home, at the grocery store, and when getting an overpriced tank of gas. Defund the police movement has hurt and set back our country in so many ways, it's yet to be seen. Police officers are fleeing from their departments at alarming rates. They don't want to be cops anymore. They'll go do anything now other than be a police officer. The same police officers that came on with passion, confidence, and empathy, the right police officers that we want on our streets to protect our families and our communities. They can't do it anymore. And a lot has to do with this narrative of defund the police. Think about this. When you have a large amount of police officers leaving a department at the same time with 20, 25, 30 years of experience, think about the knowledge that is lost there, the experience that is lost there. That loss of experience and knowledge affects not only the safety of our police officers, but the safety of you and your family. Years of learning how to fight the fight and fight in the trenches and stay on the street and not back down and hold that line is gone. One thing that you may not have thought about is the fact that people just don't want to be police officers anymore. And what does that look like? In 1996, when I took my police test, I took it with almost 500 people competing for 2 jobs. Recently, a large department that routinely gets close to 1,000 applicants had 42 applicants. They had 42 applicants. Put this into even more perspective, less candidates for a lot of open positions that need to be filled means a lesser quality candidate, a weaker police officer, one that doesn't know how to be a police officer, never really wanted to be a police officer, and to be honest with you, doesn't have the balls to be a police officer. Yet laws and our politicians continue across our country to side with the criminal, Felonies are becoming misdemeanors. Misdemeanors are becoming infractions, and everything else just a slap on the wrist. A slap on the wrist with a stern, "You're a bad boy. Don't do that again." I wouldn't want to be a cop in this environment. I bled blue my whole life, but I was fortunate to get out when I did. It's a shame, to be honest with you, because I had 10 more years left in me in law enforcement. So who are our candidates for our new officers? They have the same ideologies that we did. They're going to change the world, but they're going to do it in the way that the public wants them to do it, or the perceived way the public wants them to do it. Let's just hug everybody, slap them on the wrist and send them on their way. Don't do that again. We could guide them with discussions and maybe even hand out some participation trophies. Oh, you and your thug friends got together one night and decided to put on black ski masks and all black gear and walk into a jewelry store and smash every glass case in there and steal whatever shit you wanted? Okay, cool. We'll just claim it through our insurance. It's total bullshit. And why this episode needed to get out and why more need to happen behind it. You got to understand that the criminal only knows one thing, and that's how to be a criminal. A heroin addict only knows how to be a heroin addict. Now, before you throw stones or judge me, my belief is that addiction is a disease and has some to do with a mental disorder. I've lost people very close to me to heroin. Upright citizens that were, in fact, police officers at one time. It's an addiction that's like no other. Heroin is an absolute animal. But to be a good police officer, you need to be a certain type of person. You have to completely lack criminal intention. You have to be fair and just. You have to respect humankind. You got to be empathetic toward those that are suffering and want to help them. More importantly, you need to have courage. You need to act selflessly, and you have to always believe in doing the right thing. Last section in that law enforcement code of ethics: to protect the innocent against deception, the weak against oppression or intimidation, and the peaceful against violence or disorder. So despite what a small group of people with large mouths and some influence have to say, we as a functioning society need and want police officers. As I move this podcast down the road, I will continue to share the knowledge that I believe must be put out there. In a country that is so twisted and misguided with the way law enforcement does their job, it's time someone speaks up and gets the correct information out there. I have no limitations anymore. I was handcuffed under policy and procedure from a department that I worked my entire life for, and I understand why we had to stay quiet. But now I don't. It's important to understand just how dangerous it is out there. Please leave a comment. Please share this podcast. I'd really appreciate any help you guys could give me. Stay safe and don't take anybody's shit.